Penny from My Decozo, and along with Louise, who's going to do the narration today, we're going to show you how to make a lined Roman blind.
Using a cord lift enclosed cassette track. The track should be 1 centimetre shorter than the finished width of your blind. This is the chain that operates the blind. This is the hook tape where you attach the blind. These are the cords that raise and lower the blind. For safety reasons, we recommend you use a clip to hold the operating chain to the wall. There are various different styles available. You will also need a weight bar to fit into the hem of the blind and fiberglass rods to place in the blind to help create the folds when the blind is used. A more cost-effective option is a wooden batten, for instance 18mm by 33mm. It needs to be 1 centimetre shorter than the finished width of your blind. It can be painted or covered in lining or face fabric. Next you need screw eyes to carry the cords which raise and lower the blind. These screw into the wooden batten as shown. Next, you need the hook side of self-adhesive hook and loop tape, which secures the fabric blind in place. We recommend you also staple this to the wooden batten. A cleat is required to screw to the wall and hold the cords for the blind in place when it is raised. You also need an acorn to tidy the cords and hold them in place. Finally, you need cord to raise and lower the blind. This must be suitable for Roman blinds. You will also need a hem weight bar and rods as before. To achieve a professional finished blind, it is important to consider the headrail allowance of the system you are using. This is calculated as 1.5 times the depth of the rail. In our example, this is 4 centimetres, so our headrail allowance will be 1.5 times 4, which is 6 centimetres. The next step is to calculate the folds of the blind. Each fold is made up of 2 sections. The finished drop of our blind is 104 centimetres. Removing our headrail allowance of 6 centimetres leaves 98 centimetres. We need to divide this amount by the required number of sections, which in this case is 7. In all blinds this will always be an odd number. Each section of our blind will therefore be 14 centimetres. Penny is now going to draw a diagram to represent the back of our Roman blind. First, she divides the blind into 7 sections. The black lines represent the blind rods. The dotted lines represent the folds in the blind. Each section measures 14 centimetres, so the space between the rods will be 28 centimetres. The bottom section is 14 centimetres. The next 2 sections, 5 and 6, are 14 plus 14, which is 28 centimetres. Repeat for sections 3 and 4. For the top 2 sections, you've got 14 plus 14, and then you need to add your 6 centimetre headrail allowance back on. Finally, to check your calculations, you have 34 plus 28 plus 28 plus 14, which is 104 centimetres, the total finished drop of our blind. Now we can start working with the fabric and the lining. Our finished blind will be 61 centimetres wide and 104 centimetres long. you need to add a total of 10 centimetres for side turnings to the width, so we've cut our fabric to 71 centimetres. For the length of the fabric, you take the length of the blind, for us 104 centimetres, and add a top turning of 6 centimetres and a bottom hem turning of 10 centimetres. Our fabric is therefore cut to 120 centimetres. Mark the top of the blind. Turn the fabric over, fold and press a 5 centimetre turning down one side of the fabric. Then measure across from that fold the finished blind width in several places, for us 61 centimetres. Lightly iron this second turning down the total length of the fabric. It is important this is done accurately. Next, turn over the top allowance of 6 centimetres and lightly iron into place. Again, it is important this is done accurately. A set square is useful. The final stage is to measure down from the top turning the finished drop of 104 centimetres. Do this at least 3 times across the width. Turn over the hem allowance and lightly iron into place. Open at the top and side turnings. Place the loop tape on the top hem allowance above the fold. Anchor with pins. Machine the tape top and bottom across the width of the blind. The lining is cut to the finished width of the blind. The length of the lining needs to be the finished drop of the blind, in this case 104 centimetres, plus a top turning allowance of 5 centimetres and a bottom turning allowance of 5 centimetres. We also need to add 2 centimetres per rod pocket. Our blind has 3 rods, so we've allowed 6 centimetres. The total lining cut length for our blind is 104 centimetres plus 5 centimetres top allowance, 5 centimetres bottom allowance and 6 centimetres for the rod pockets, which is a total of 120 centimetres. You might want to allow a little extra that can be trimmed away, so we have cut to 125 centimetres. The next step is to prepare the lining by pressing in the side and bottom hem folds. Turn and press 2.5 centimetre hems down both sides of the lining. Turn the lining right side up, fold and press a 5 centimetre hem right side to right side. This will be the bottom of the blind. Now we are ready to make the rod pockets. Using our previous calculations, measure the first 14 centimetre section up from the bottom fold. Then measure a further 1 centimetre up from that point and mark both sides of the lining with a pin. Using a straight edge, draw a faint pencil line from pin to pin. If you prefer, you could use a fading fabric marker pen. This is the fold line of your first rod pocket. Fold the lining, wrong sides together, accurately along the faint pencil line. Press. If you want a sew line, mark another light pencil line 1 centimetre above the fold. Take to your machine and sew accurately using the second line as a guide. If you prefer not to draw a sew line, your machine may have a 1 centimetre seam width guide on the plate. Fold along the first rod pocket, measure up from the first stitch line, not the fold line, 28 centimetres, and then a further 1 centimetre. Place a pin to both sides of the lining. Draw a light fold line between the pins as before. Fold the lining wrong sides together along the line and press. Mark the 1 centimetre sew line lightly if you require one. Stitch the second rod pocket. Repeat for the third rod pocket. The remaining fabric above the third rod pocket is for the top of the blind and heading allowance. For demonstration purposes, we have marked the sewing line. Once you have gained confidence, you will find you no longer need to do this. To secure the side turnings of the blind fabric, we are making herringbone stitches down both sides. We are now ready to join the lining to the fabric. Lay the fabric face down. Measure up 14 centimetres from the hem fold on both sides and place a pin. This marks the position of the first rod pocket. Then measure 28 centimetres from the pin marking the first rod pocket and place pins. This marks the second rod pocket. Repeat for the third rod pocket. Lay the lining right side up on top of the fabric, ensuring you have 2.5 centimetres of face fabric showing either side. Make sure the stitch lines of the rod pockets are aligned with the pins. You may need to make slight adjustments at this point. Pin the lining in place, ready for slip stitching to the fabric. It is important to keep the blind as flat as possible at this stage. The slip stitches should join the lining to the side turning fabric only. They should not go through to the face of the blind. Once the lining is attached to the fabric, the next step is to mark the ring positions on the rod pockets. A sensible rule of thumb is to place them 10 centimetres in from the edge of the fabric. A larger blind will need further rows of rings. Check the number of cord drops on your blind track. To make sure the ring positions are square to each other and the blind draws up level, fold the blind so that the rod pockets stack on top of each other, making sure the sides of the blind are aligned, ready to attach the rings. To secure the fabric and lining together, make small stab stitches under the rod pockets on the seam line at each ring position. For demonstration purposes, we are using contrast thread. You would use a thread that matches your face fabric. As a general rule, make extra stab stitches evenly across the rod pockets, not more than 30 centimetres apart. Penny is now folding the bottom hem in place, ready for slip stitching, leaving the ends open. Next, complete the top of the blind. Trim away any excess lining at the top fold line. Next, trim the fabric to leave 2 centimetres beyond the loop tape. Fold and press a 1.5 centimetre turning. Pin in place through all the layers and slip stitch through the lining only. The blind is now ready to add the rods. Measure the width of the rod pockets and carefully cut your rods 1 centimetre shorter. Insert a rod in each pocket and hand stitch the ends closed. Hand sew a ring 10 centimetres in from the edge of the blind, corresponding with each cord drop. cut the weight bar 2 centimetres shorter than the width of your blind. Slide it into the bottom hem pocket and hand stitch both ends of the hem closed. Finally, we can attach the blind to the track. Ensure the cord drops are fully extended, then thread the cords down through the rings. We are securing the cords in place using sprung blind orbs. If you have difficulty obtaining these, you could knot the cord to the bottom ring, making sure all cords are equal, or the blind will not remain level. This is our completed blind in operation.